they were on the forefront of this prediction is something I point to with Zeta Talk accuracy. That's an example. And what's happening is during the wobble, you're having the Earth shoved under the blanket of air. The southern states are being pushed up under the Arctic and dragging Arctic air back with it. But likewise, the northern states are being pulled down under the tropical weather and pulling warm air back up with them. It's so unpredictable. The weathermen have a terrible time predicting these days because they are not taking into account this wobble. They are taking into account only all the variables that have guided them through decades, like the prevailing westerlies and the rotation of the Earth and the high pressure and low pressure exchanging. And it seems to me 10 years ago we would have temperature variations of like 30 degrees at most, like in a day or two drop or a rise. Now 50 degrees is not unusual, and that's changed.
Well, the meteorologists are just, you can tell they're completely baffled by what's going on. They have to pretend when they're on the air as if what's happening is normal, but I think in the back of their minds they know what's going on is not normal. For instance, we've seen several inches of snow in New Orleans here a few weeks ago. In fact, we had 5 or more inches that fell last month right here in the Baton Rouge metro area.
Right.
We have also seen snow in Las Vegas and Los Angeles, for instance.
Yeah.
Now, the northern tier of the U.S. has been suffering through a winter unheard of in recent years. Frigid below-zero temperatures in the Dakotas, Minnesota, up there where you're at in Wisconsin, and other areas of the Midwest, as well as record-breaking snowfall in Washington State and the Seattle area.
Yes.
Now, last week, much of the snowfall and colder temperatures gave way to warmer temperatures in these northern Great Lakes regions, enough to cause the snow to melt, resulting in major flooding in those regions for the first part of January.
Right.
Now, is this crazy wobbling of the Earth responsible for the weather patterns we are seeing across much of the U.S.? And if so, what can we expect to see occur in the immediate future?
Yes, the answer is yes. And there's another aspect, and that is that because the North Pole of Planet X is beginning to point toward us, even though the wobble is going on, the bounce back is not as strong as the push away, and the whole northern hemisphere is experiencing more cold. And last winter, the 2007 to 2008, was cold throughout the northern hemisphere, colder than usual, and we're having another one like it. Yes, and it is because of the wobble and the push away, but the Zetas have said the wobble will worsen, and what this means is, as well as starting a lean to the left and the like, in which...
Explain to us the lean to the left, because I think, including myself, there are people that are, a little bit confused by the lean to the left. What does this mean?
Right. If you're in the northern hemisphere, if you're in the southern hemisphere, everything's up. They stand upside down anyway. They're hanging off the earth by their feet. So if you're on the northern hemisphere and you're looking at the sun, left means, where the world is going to rotate toward dusk, and to the right, is off. To the right is to the west, and to the left is to the east. There we go.
Okay.
And the globe is considered like straight up and down. North Pole is up, South Pole is down. The lean to the left is where the North Pole goes over to the east, almost to a 90-degree point, and the South Pole comes up, to be almost to the west to the 90-degree point, so that it would fall on its side. Geographically, the North Pole is directly east, pointing, and the South Pole is directly west.
Has this happened before, this falling to the side?
Actually, it's for a brief period of time on its way to rolling into the 3 days of darkness. And yes, the 3 days of darkness that has happened, in the past. It's the normal process into... like Plato described the ancient Egyptians reporting, and the ancient Egyptians were excellent at reporting what had happened. They kept records through several pole shifts, including the Great Flood, and it's documented in the Kolbrin, which is, in fact, Egyptian record that parallels the Bible. in the Book of Exodus, for instance, is
okay.
very
That's
close
important
to.
when you talk about the Kolbrin, because I've gotten emails from people, and I've heard other people say that, well, where is the documentation that all of these things occurred 3,600 years ago or 3,600 years before then?
Yeah.
Where is all this documentation at?
Right.
Who's keeping it?
Yeah, the Kolbrin, and it was apparently somebody attempted to destroy it. There was a great fire in Scotland, and then they moved it to New Zealand, and it was written on copper, not papyrus or something, and so it lasted, and you can get your hands on it now if you go on the internet and find it. And I've got quite a few good quotes on my website too from it, and it described the flood and the Jewish exodus and in great detail what people went through. There's also as far as so to just wrap up your question about what to expect, the Zetas have said the seasons will blend with one another. You will have snow in summer and summer days in the middle of winter. We're approaching that already. Many countries having snow in summer and the like.
Oh, absolutely. We're already seeing that, like I mentioned.
Very very early warm temperatures in the middle of winter. But they said it'll get to the point where everything blends, and the wobble will worsen. It'll get whoa like a drunk, and then we'll fall on our side and then roll our North Pole back into 3 days of darkness. In the Kolbrin, and talking about the Great Flood and the Jewish Exodus, that's word of mouth describing what people experience. But the geological record is more convincing. Emmanuel Velikovsky's book, Earth in Upheaval, for instance, describes in the Mediterranean caves 200 to 300 feet above the Mediterranean, finding the bones of predator and prey alike smashed to pieces as though by a great wave. Many different predators, many different prey swept up by waves and sloshing from Africa. And they said there is no explanation for this. I mean, the predators did not bring their prey to the cave and gnaw on the bones. That's not what we find here. No teeth marks. They are broken bones, smashed as though a wave was picking these animals up and smashing them into the cave time and time again.
It's
an
interesting,
example.
Nancy, when you talk about these waves, I didn't mean to interrupt you here,
sure.
but I had this thought in my mind because I've been hearing this lately in my readings here on the Internet, that there are people that might be standing along the shoreline, and this just happened recently, and all of a sudden this big wave comes up and washes them out to sea. Or there's these people that are out fishing, the fishermen out in the Pacific, and all of a sudden this huge wave comes up and sinks their ship. And we're hearing a lot about that here today. Does that have something to do with that swashing of the oceans that you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. The ocean waves are, because you can imagine the blanket of air and the oceans, in fact, are a blanket of water. That does not necessarily move with the Earth. The Earth moves under these blankets. That's why at the hour of the pole shift we're going to have hurricane force winds, because we're moving under the blanket of air. And that's why we're going to have this kind of sloshing where tidal waves can roll 100 miles or more inland to a level of 200 feet above sea level, because of the Earth moving under the oceans. And that's happening to a moderate degree during the wobble, and as the wobble worsens, we can expect this to increase, yes.
Okay. Now, you can go back to what you were saying, what we were referring to a minute ago.
Yeah, the evidence, I mentioned the oceans of the world dropping. They time date this, the broken bones, and there it is, 3,600 years ago. The passage of Niagara changed, the course of Niagara changed somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. We had a different path. In this coming pole shift, the Zetas say the seaway will rip open and we won't have falls anymore. We're going to have a more moderate flow. So there's these pieces of evidence all over. Steens Mountain, maybe it's pronounced that, which had a volcanic eruption, and the magma was hardening, during the